Hi everyone, Matt Bentley-Walls here. Here to throw about some ideas, discuss the great debate. Standard versus wide lenses. That's what people tend to shoot street photography with. That's, longer lenses, not so much. I'm sure there are people out there that do, but this is the vlog ostensibly for people starting out in photography, maybe about to go and buy a lens. They're not sure, they're going to spend a lot of money, and they just want a little bit of info on what might be the best lens for them. Given the fact that I'm a big believer in using one lens, prime lens, maybe you've got a deep pocket and you can buy all the lenses known to man. I wouldn't suggest that. I'd still use I'd still use one lens, because you get used to that lens and it becomes very, very familiar, very automatic, and it makes you very, very good, very attuned to how that one lens sees the world, and I think you make much better photographs as a result. So yeah, this is for people like that, people who are familiar with focal lengths and what have you. That's fine. These two lenses is 50. Well, that's a 35. This is the 50. This is a Summicron. This is a Summarit 50. Okay, I'm going to try and avoid names and technical jargon, but I can't. I've got to. Let's just refer to them as a standard lens and a wide-angle lens. This is actually a 35, but you've got 28, you've got 24. But the 50mm lens, regardless of whether it's Leica, Nikon, Canon, or any other make, 50mm lenses are referred to always as standard lenses. Anything, 35, 28, 24, wide lenses. So, yeah. I think what I'm going to do is split this into two. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the physics of the lens itself. I'm not going to go hugely deep, and I'm going to avoid trying to sound like a university physics professor, but I don't want to patronize you either. But I'm going to err on the side of caution and try and keep things simple. So I'll probably, end up sounding patronizing. Apologies for that in advance, but hey, I'll take it on the chin. It's just for the interest of clarity and simplicity for those starting out, for the people that are starting out and wondering what lens. I'm spending a sizable chunk of money here. What lens? What should I go with? And I'll say straight off, there is no right lens. There might be a right lens for you, but I think sometimes some people starting out, I know I was guilty, hand up. When I was starting out, I kind of thought, okay, I like that person's work. What lens do they use? Bingo, that's the way to go. Not so much, because they see a certain way. When they put the camera to their eye, that feels comfortable to them. That might not be the case with you. You might like their work, but that's not what feels comfortable to your eye. So I'm going to talk about some various characteristics and some watch out fors. And hopefully that might sort of throw some light, pardon the pun, onto the whole debacle, the whole debate, standard versus, I think it's reasonable to say that most people who shoot street photography opt for a wider lens, whether it be 35, 28, 24. They opt for a wider lens. And I sometimes wonder whether, hey, you know, maybe they're all right, but maybe they're not. Or maybe they choose a wider angle lens for the wrong reason, or, who knows? Who knows? But hey, let's get on with it. Let's get to it. So straight off, most people say that a 50mm lens is a great lens to learn with, and for very good reason. It is a really good lens to understand depth of field with. So basically, if I'm on the street, this is me on the street, and I'm shooting subject matter 5 meters away. I've got a 50mm lens on, and I'm going to shoot at 5.6, something in the middle, 5.6. Thereabouts. No, it's 5.6. I take the photograph. Great, 50mm lens. I then decide, okay, I'm going to reach into my bag, which is an oxymoron in itself because I don't carry a bag, as I've mentioned in previous vlogs. But hypothetically, let's assume I've got a bag and I've got a 35mm lens in there as well. I take the 50 off, put the 35 on. Again, shoot at 5.6. Boom. Thank you very much. The wider angle lens will give me more in focus in front of the subject matter and beyond the subject matter. The 50 standard lens will give me less in focus. More will start falling out of focus in the front and at the back. That's a key thing to remember. You get more fall off in depth of field with a 50mm lens, with a standard lens. And so some people say that's less forgiving. I don't say that. I say I have more choice. Sometimes I'm shooting and the background is ugly as sin, or it's just... I'm going to throw some examples up here. I'm going to throw one up now. So you can see I've exposed incorrectly for this. I should have exposed for the highlights because it's a digital image. I've blown my highlights, but they're also in the background, and I've got scaffolding and I've got people in the background that, don't look out of place, but that's not, I want to shoot with the subject matter pin sharp or as sharp as I can get it and blow the highlights. I've not deliberately exposed incorrectly. It was just a one-off shot, really, really quick. Didn't get a chance to think really, apart from anything else. But I knew where my aperture was, and I was happy with that because it's just a fussy kind of background, and it helps separate the foreground from the background, which isn't up to much. Sometimes the background is beautiful, and I want the background. In fact, I want everything pin sharp in that scene. It's a delicate thing. You make those choices at any given time. I always start out, I think, when I'm walking down the road with my camera, I'm always thinking, I want everything sharp. But I don't put my aperture at f16 to give me the maximum depth of field to get everything sharp. I always keep it, round about the middle, and if it's digital, then I've obviously gauged my ISO as I step outside the door, what kind of conditions, how sunny and what have you. But I keep it, the exposure, my shutter speed, more or less, again, round about probably 250, something like that. But I can play with that. That's not a big deal. But I want it to be parked around about 250. I don't mind going down, to a 30th of a second, a 15th of a second, and getting a little bit of movement sometimes. But I've got leeway. I can go either way. I've got a lot of latitude there. My aperture, I want middle for diddle as well, in the middle, so I can go either way, depending on what the scene is. Again, you're shooting quickly on the hoof, so you've kind of got to be quick. You've got to know your camera. You've got to be very, very at one with your camera. So you're almost not thinking about it. It's almost kind of like second nature. You don't want to be fiddling around and messing around when you want to be able to engage with the world with minimum fuss. So I will say straight off, my weapon of choice is the 50mm lens. It has been for a long, long time now. I mean, the 35 Summicron is a beautiful lens, don't get me wrong, and sometimes I'm out and I'm thinking 35 might have been better there, but not very often. Most of the time I find 50 works for me. It works for my eye. It works for the way I see the world. It's an aesthetic. It's what feels comfortable to you, bearing in mind that any lens will eventually feel comfortable to you because your brain will configure it. But that said, and I think this is one of the key things to bear in mind when you're deciding, when you're choosing which lens. When I lift the camera with a 50mm lens on, there it goes, that's my dominant eye. I want a 1-to-1 ratio between what I see and the world. That's what a 50mm does. There are no surprises. There's no, I don't lift the camera and then everything suddenly becomes wide. I think some people who use wide angle lenses kind of go, well, I want to see everything. I want to see. Well, that's where maybe a rangefinder camera comes in, because you see all of this middle and to the right, but it allows you to open this eye. So you see everything with this eye. You don't have to get it all in the viewfinder at that one particular moment. So I can understand wanting to see more of the scene, but when it comes to actually taking the photograph, putting that rectangle around something, I think a lot of wide shots look a little bit airy, a little too much space in them, a little bit too much. But that's just me. That's, some people, like that. It's just the way you see the world. But ostensibly, the 50mm, you engage, you lift it to your eye, and it is what you see. Whether you've got the camera to your eye, the world stays the same. With a wide-angle lens, you lift the camera and everything seems further away. It's not a one-to-one. The 50 is a very honest, straightforward look onto the world. And that's what I love about it. I know exactly where to walk to, what distance to keep, because my eye, whether I've got the camera to my eye or not, my eye is seeing what I'm seeing, and I know where to stop, because the camera's going to render exactly what my eye and brain are seeing. No surprises. It's not going to fall away. It's not going to fall off. And that's why I always 95% of the time use a 50mm lens. This is probably a third of the price of this Summarit 35 Summicron. This is, it's a heavier lens. It's a much better quality lens in many respects. I'm not saying that's a bad lens, far from it. But even though it's not as, as expensive, I will still use the 50. I had my 50 Summicron stolen. So, but I'm not going, oh, well, I'm going to go to the better lens. I'm still going to stay with my 50, because 50 not only is familiar to me, but is very, very comfortable, and I engage with the world 1-to-1, no surprises, and I love that. It's a beautiful thing. Now, in terms of practicalities, never mind depth of field. Depth of field is one thing. You can use it or not. The wide will always be more forgiving. I think that's why people kind of gravitate towards it. It's more forgiving. Most things are in focus. F8 on a decent, normal day where it's not really overcast or something, you'll get most things in. And so people kind of err on the side of caution. Whereas to me, it's completely different. You know, I want some things out of focus sometimes. And I love some shots that are, where the background is completely out of focus. It's much easier to get that with a 50mm lens than it is with a wide lens. And I, you know, call me fussy, I don't know. But I like choice. I like that, you know, I think some images just, you know, shot here of, taken in Portugal, I don't need focus. It's a sort of wider shot anyway. And I want all that sort of fussiness around this English tourist or British tourist looking pasty white. I want that to sort of, you know, be set off against the sort of lovely bronzed bodies of the Portuguese, and in clutching his wallet, looking a bit insecure and incongruous. You know, depth of field doesn't even come into my mind with this shot. It just, you know, everything in, shoot it at f8, I'm sufficiently far away, the wide shot is going to work perfectly. That was the thinking behind this photograph. With other shots, you're a bit closer in, or a lot closer in, and you know, you need to kind of think about your depth of field, whether you want everything in. You know, you can get everything sharp with a 50mm lens. I'm not saying you know, you're stuck with a short depth of field. Not at all. You know, f16, you know, everything's going to be in focus. You know, and I'll say that sometimes lighting conditions mean that, hey, doesn't matter what lens you've got on, you know, you've just got rubbish light or really low light, and you've got to open up to f2, end of story kind of thing. But I'm going to throw some examples up. So, you know, there are people like Matt Stewart, who I did a vlog about doing one of his workshops. You can see that on my channel. You know, people who have, you know, fairly famous photographers, Cartier-Bresson, Gary Winogrand, Joel Meyerowitz, they, you know, Cartier-Bresson was famous for 50mm standard lens. I think there's some evidence to suggest that maybe he went occasionally wider, but not much wider, if he did at all. I think Matt Stewart's a 35 man. I don't know. Some of his shots look a bit wider than that to me, but I'm not sure. You know, certainly a wide man, certainly not a 50mm man. Gary Winogrand, if my memory, don't quote me on this, but I think he was a 28mm, so pretty wide. Again, there's no right or wrong. It's just what works for you. However, let's talk about some actual practicalities when using these lenses. Besides depth of field and tolerances or lack of. So start, you know, straight off. You know, personally speaking, and from the evidence of people that use them, I find wide-angle lenses much more difficult to keep horizontals horizontal, verticals vertical, and the wider the lens, the more that will accentuate. Now, people like, I don't know, Matt Stewart, Gary Winogrand, you know, they don't seem to mind. I don't mind, really, but when it's my photograph, when I'm taking it, it always jars with me for some reason. Things are off at a kilter. You know, I swear some people think that's an aesthetic, and it's fine, and it's, you know, it's okay. For me, you know, I don't mind a little bit, you know. It's inevitable, it's going to happen. But it's just when it's sort of, everything looks cockeyed and a little bit off kilter. I don't know. I always find myself wanting to straighten a little bit and then you lose, you kind of, yeah, not a huge fan. If I can get vertical, I don't want people to be noticed, to be going, that's off kilter straight away, or yeah, he's used a wide lens and that's why it's off kilter. That's the last thing I want. I want people to kind of go, do you know what, that's an amazing image, that's a rubbish image. But I don't want them thinking, well, he used a wide angle for that. You know, it's like when I look at work, with wide angle work, the first thing I notice is it's wide angle. Now, you know, I don't want people thinking, I don't want people, you know, if somebody's noticing that about my work, I'm thinking, I failed. It's failed. It's, you know, I want the content of the photograph to be king, not what lens I use. That can be an afterthought, you know, they can scrutinize it a little bit more afterwards, but I want the content of the image to be the first thing that somebody sees, not thinking, you know, and that's why a wide angle for me, that's why I don't use them. Another reason, for me, this is a key reason. I don't hear a lot spoken about it, but I think it's a really important reason, or a really important factor. I mean, not reason, because look, you're gonna go the way you go, and you know, hopefully you'll not even listen to me. You know, you will just go trial and error, and that's probably the right thing to do. But maybe, you know, a bit of discussion, whatever, can make you go one way or the other. But here's something to consider. So we're shooting street photography. This is all about street photography. I'm going to keep on saying it. When I have even a 35mm lens on, I find myself, I think it was Kappa that said, if your photographs aren't good enough, then you're not close enough, or something along those lines. And that's a bit of an ambiguous comment, but ostensibly, when I've got a wide angle lens on, even a 35, I tend to find I'm stepping into the scene more. I'm getting closer, physically closer to the subject matter to get, you know, to get to where I would get to with a 50mm lens. And that means I am, more often than not, encroaching on people's personal space. Now, I like to behave well. I am a big believer that you respect people. Respect. That's a difficult one straight away. No, not respect, but you don't disrespect people. Don't be obnoxious. Don't be arrogant. Don't put a camera in people's faces. And that tends to be what I noticed I was doing a little bit with wide angle lenses, in trying to get close enough to get a good image. And you know, if you're stepping on people's toes, then that's not good. In my opinion, there are photographers that do it, and I don't care how good their work is or not good their work is. I can't look at it because I know what's gone on. I know what they've done, and I don't you know, it's just do unto others as others would do unto you kind of thing. It's a very straightforward thing. Don't disrespect people. You know, I know, you know, respecting is about, I'm from the old school, I guess. You know, it's not about, you know, respect me. I mean, no. I was taught that you have to earn respect. You don't just get given it automatically. But there's a big difference between that and disrespecting people, I think. Don't disrespect people. That's not appropriate. That's not good. With a wide angle lens, I find to make a shot interesting, or a shot, I talked earlier about there being too much air in wide shots, and I think that happens when people don't get in close enough. And so, it's a double-edged sword. You've got to get in close, but then you're being too close. You're getting too in people's faces, which is why I use 50, because it gives, I know where to go, and I find that where I go, which is the right place to go, is not too close to somebody. With a wide angle, you see, then it falls off. So you take another couple of steps in to try and make it not too airy, and suddenly you're treading on people's corns, toes, let alone feet. That, and I think that's something worthwhile considering. The other thing is that if the more kind of you step up away, because you don't want to tread on people's corns, the more things can go off kilter. And so, don't get me wrong, sometimes a 35 is really useful. I've still got my 35. Sometimes if I know in advance I'm limited for space, the opposite happens. I need, a 35 will allow me to look as though I've got a bit more space. And it will open things up a little bit when I'm cramped in, when conditions are very, claustrophobic. It'll just give, it'll just help open out things a little bit. But, I'm not saying I use 50, therefore you use 50. Not at all. But these are just thoughts that I'm throwing around. A lot of Winogrand's work and Joe Myritt's, all wide angle. Who am I to argue with them? I'm not arguing with them at all. Their work stands alone. But quite a few of their images are off kilter. They're on the, the horizontals aren't horizontal, verticals aren't vertical. That's cool. If you like that aesthetic, then there's no problem. For me, it just looks a little bit loose sometimes. Not always, it depends on the shot. Sometimes you don't really notice it. And other times it's a really good shot, except everything looks cockeyed. It's like a dog's leg. And look, so this photograph of Joe Myritt's, this is one of his most famous photographs, I think. The two people shadow falling onto the other two people shadow, both are wearing camel coats of sorts. Brilliant shot. My eye says, wow, that's a great shot. But then I think it's a little bit wide. Too much space. Doesn't ruin the shot, but if I'd taken that shot, I would find myself wanting to crop a little bit. And I don't crop. I won't crop. Because one, I lose some quality of the photograph. And two, I have this fixation, rightly or wrongly, that what you're seeing is what I saw. It's like I remember going into a Cartier, the first time I went to a Cartier-Bresson exhibition, and I was familiar with all of his work, and I went up to the first image, framed, nicely framed, everything. And I looked at it, and it wasn't one of his most famous photographs. It was still a cracking photograph. But I looked at this first photograph, and I had this, I had this sharp intake of breath. It was like, poor. And I was trying to work. I realised in an instant, Cartier-Bresson shot full frame the vast majority of the time. A couple of not, but the vast majority of his work is full frame. And there it was with this sort of white bordered card mount around it. And the black edge of the film. So you could see it was full frame. And this feeling that, it was almost as though he was saying to me or the viewer, like this image, don't like this image, but this is what I saw. It was as though I was taking that photograph. It was as though I was looking through his camera. This is the image I saw. Great, move on, next image. But no, it was an emotional thing. It was a really emotional thing. It was like I got this feeling that this is the difference between going to a live concert and hearing live music versus putting the CD on of the same track in the comfort of your home. Both are lovely, but when you're seeing it up close in its raw state, in its actual state, in its most honest state, I'd never had that feeling when I was looking through his book. I just thought, yeah, these are great images. I love how he does stuff. I love how he sees the world. I love what he photographs. That humanistic thing, the human condition. But that was the first time that happened. It was like, whoa, okay. And that was the same for every image. It was a very emotional thing. It's like going to an exhibition or an art gallery or something and seeing every stroke, the brush made and the actual colours, not a reproduction of colours. There was just something very visceral about it. Very, whoa! You could see the sprockets and it was just, it was just an incredible thing. And so, with wide angles, I think there's more chance that, for me, I'm going to go, I need to crop that. It's too wide. There's too much air. There's too much space. And I don't want to crop. And when I put a 50 on, I tend to just walk up. I see what it is. There's no surprises. Boom. It's either a great image or it isn't. It either works or it doesn't. More often than not, it doesn't. That's the nature of the beast with street photography. So that's fine. But I don't find myself thinking, oh, there's too much space here. There's too much. It's too fussy. There's too much going on. There's stuff's taking my eye away. The Joel Meyritz's shot. You can go, well, he's playing with. He's using disparate components in the shot to link up. To make links, to make connections with. And that's kind of what he does, which I love, I think is great. But for me, wide angles look wide. I love films. And you see these films and you've got these gorgeous panoramic wide angle shots. And I sometimes used to think, back in the day, I'm going to get a wide angle, But a wide-angle scenic shot is very different to a street photography image. Both are beautiful. Both work in their own way at the right time. Time and place maybe. But for me, 50 every single time. That's on my camera. 50 Suma. It's on my camera. 95. Probably, more than that. Probably 99% of the time. It's maybe a little bit boring. I don't know. It's, there is something very sexy about a wide angle lens. I get it. I totally get it. It's like, but got to go in a bit closer. And, I'm not scared of going in close, but I don't believe that is a good way to behave. When you lift the camera, the image takes precedence, so you kind of just go and get the image, and then you realize, oh, I was a bit close there, I was a bit, and I'm not happy doing that. It's not because I think I'm going to get punched, but no, I mean, I might do, but it's just behaving well, the 50 allows me to behave well and get the image I want and not have to crop, and gives me oodles of choice with depth of field, oodles. And I love this. I really love this sometimes. Again, example here of throwing, focusing on the beads of water on the table. That was what was totally catching my eye. The rest, the legs and the table behind, and I don't need to. I'm not really remotely interested in that. I don't want to hide them or make them disappear. That's just part of the shot. That's part of what it is, But stick it out of focus just made sense. It's not even a discussion for me. Other people might go, no, I want everything in focus. End of story. And hey, maybe the wide angle is better for you. Most of the time I do want things in focus. The 50 just gives you that. It's much more difficult to put things out of focus with a wider angle lens. You've got to go in closer for a start off, generally speaking, and you've got to open up really, to f2 or 2.8 or whatever your lens does. And then the fall off isn't as much. It's not as, I won't say dramatic as the 50mm lens, but it's not as obvious. And sometimes I see shots that, from a wide angle lens where the background is slightly out of focus, but it's not sufficiently out of focus. It's just a very, it's a 15% out of focus. And that doesn't really do the job for me. It doesn't separate things out. If you go to a very long lens, and that will just make, the background absolutely, you won't even recognize what it is. It just completely throws everything into, odd surreal shapes or something. 50 gives me just the right amount that I find pleasing. That if I'd shot this table with the rain on it with a 35mm lens, far more, the same f-stop, far more would be in focus in the background and in the foreground. And that's either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your eye. No right or wrong. Just what floats your boat. Just what works with the way you see and how you like to see things. It comes down to that. No right or wrong here. No, there's right for me. 50 is right for me every single time. All the sort of advantages I've said about the 50 might be disadvantages to you. But flagging them up allows you to, weigh it up and understand it a little bit better. Something like Cartier-Bresson shot with a 50, but most of his images are in focus. He would shoot at probably f11 most of the time. That's not true of all of his images, but the vast majority, I think, pretty much most things are in focus. And that's exactly my thing as well. I want things in focus, but there are times when I don't. There are times when I just want to open up a bit more and shoot at f4 rather than f11, for example, or f16. Depends on the subject completely, and it's a delicate thing. You just decide at the time if you have time. Often you don't have time, so you just shoot with what will render a well-exposed image. I think Cartier-Bresson himself said, somebody said, oh, one of your images is out of focus, and he said, this isn't a direct quote, but it was something like, you don't get time to focus when you're shooting street photography. The definition of a street photograph is one that's out of focus, because you're reacting so quickly. So so look, I can talk about the differences and the pros and cons of the wide versus standard debate all day long, but I don't want to rattle on too much because I think it might be a little bit daunting, a little bit overwhelming if I do. But I think those are the main characteristics to think about, to throw around, to you know, and if you're thinking of buying a lens, don't blame me if you know, it's like, it's a difficult thing. I'm doing this vlog precisely because I remember when I was starting out, I was seduced by a wide lens for sure, but I used a 50 most of the time, and I knew pretty early on that I was veering towards the 50. But I wasn't decided. I wasn't sure. I was thinking, am I missing a trick? And look, as I said earlier, sometimes you've got your 50 on, and once in a blue moon, you kind of go, 35 might have been a little bit, yeah. That's not going to make me think, oh, I'll buy a zoom. No. I mentioned that earlier. Don't ever buy a zoom. Not for street. Fantastic lenses in many ways for other applications of photography, but not for street. You don't get time to decide in or out, and then you get stuck in between, and then you're not really looking at the scene. You're not really looking at you're deciding where to go. Is that right? No. People go. I think, but some people go, well, I'm not going to box myself just yet because I'm not decided. So the wide will give me some latitude, and it doesn't work like that. On paper, yes, but not in not in reality. It doesn't. It's you just stand there and Instead of just one prime lens, getting very, very familiar with that, your brain works it out, and before long, you're not even thinking about where you need to stand, how close or how far. You just know. It's a sixth sense. It's just it becomes automatic, and you're there. Boom. Once in a very blue moon, I go, oh, it'd be nice to have had a zoom, something happening at the top of a building, or just to bring me in a bit closer. But hey, it's a fair trade, fair trade-off. I'm going to miss the occasional shot. I miss shots all the time anyway because, that's street photography. Pachyderm. Be thick-skinned. Think about the next shot that might be amazing, and that's my mindset every single time. You're editing, you're looking at stuff in Lightroom, for example. No. Oh, maybe once in a blue moon, and that's why it's a special thing. It's like you see it and you kind of go, wow, that's just worked. You see stuff you didn't even see when you were taking the photograph sometimes. You're not supposed to admit that, but it's that's the case, I'm afraid. Anybody that says otherwise is telling you porkies. It's a very quick thing. You've got zoom. You've got to be in, and you've got to weigh it up as much as possible. But sometimes you don't see certain things that work. So look carefully at those images, because sometimes you miss stuff. Anyway, I think that's long enough. Hope that was interesting. And yeah, something for the weekend, something to have a mull over, and hopefully maybe give you a little bit of info, a little bit of something to mull over. Hey, regardless, I think the debate is quite interesting anyway, whether you're buying a lens or not. But anyway, thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you for all the likes and subscriptions I'm getting now, and can't thank you enough. That's brilliant. I'll keep on doing it so long as people are liking it. Yeah. Cheers for now. See you for the next one.